Hello again, I'm John Ball, and I want to take you through a bit of fun with large language models. Only because it's important to understand that while we think of them as language models, meaning this is how language works, what they are is they're statistical engines that give you a response based on the word sequence you've entered, the so called prompt. But it doesn't understand context like a person does, and it doesn't have meaning as a person or a semanticist would call it. So let's have a bit of fun and see how we go. I'll try and keep my image here so we can um, you can see my reaction. So if we start here with the Brave browser, I'm looking for something that's unfiltered. I don't want a chatbot that's got a lot of work done to try and cover up any errors. I think Brave is simply providing some nice feedback. So I'm putting this sentence in because it's one of the ones that I've been using in linguistics. It actually gives you a very rich, meaningful interaction if you have a machine that does that properly. So John and Bill wanted to try to promise Beth, Sue, and Samantha to eat the tuna. No, meaningless sentence. Let's put it in. And now let's go to the answer with AI. So it's just a statement. Okay, so what do we get here? Well, we talked about tuna, so we're getting John West tuna. Well, that's good. And then it says, it appears that John and Beth are trying to convince Beth, Sue, and Samantha to eat tuna. However, the context does not give a clear reason. Well, that's true. I've just put in a sentence. But notice here, it says Beth in the context of the Yellowstone series. She's the character who made promises to keep them, but there's no mention of her. So it's picked up on the word Beth plus trying to convince to eat. So convince, I guess, is actually the input was promise. So Beth, so we've got the promise here, but then it's trying to convince Beth, so it doesn't quite know that promise isn't the same as convince. So Beth was a character who made promises and kept them, but there's no mention of her being promised to eat. There's no mention of her promising to eat tuna. Okay, well, I didn't mention anything about Yellowstone. About Samantha. Samantha Irby is an author who's written about tuna casserole. Well, that's very enlightened, but come on, guys. I didn't talk about Samantha. So my joke here is that when we talk to somebody, when we have a conversation and you introduce a new topic, it's very tightly coupled with how language works. So if I say Beth's going to eat the tuna, we're talking about tuna that she already knows about. I've already been talking about the tuna rather than I'm talking about tuna where I haven't introduced the tuna concept previously. So when I say Samantha, I can't just say Samantha does this, Samantha does that. I need to, if I did what you would say, if you were the person I'm talking to, you'd say, who do you mean by Samantha? I'd say, oh, Samantha, we had Samantha Irby from an author, and the author Samantha Irby. And if you know her, you'd say, okay, great. Or you'd say, I've never heard of her. So, oh, yeah, she's an author and she's written about tuna casserole. So that's how humans interact with context. And then Sue, there's no information provided about a character named Sue in relation to eating tuna. Well, come on, you can always, but there's millions and millions of names. If I said John, Bill, James, if it was Elon Musk involved, it would be, X15 or something. So there's lots and lots of names, and you don't have to know whether or not they ate tuna in order to handle a sentence that has tuna in it. So let's see. It's what else we got? It's worth noting that there's concerns about the sustainability of tuna fishing, with companies like John West being accused of breaking their promises. This might be a factor in why someone would be hesitant to eat tuna. Well, we're not talking about hesitancy. We're not talking about any of that stuff. I just said John and Bill wanted to try to promise Beth, Sue, and Samantha to eat tuna. And by the way, if John and Bill promised them to eat tuna, guess what? Beth, Samantha, and Sue are not eating the tuna. That's not what it means. I'm talking about John and Bill doing the eating of the tuna. So when you look at the meaning of the breakdown of the sentence, which I'll do in the future, you'll see just how ludicrous it is. Okay, so we can ask a follow-on question. Maybe we'll just say, who is John, because it talked to us about Beth, Samantha, and Sue. How about John? So I'm just adding that now. Oh, here we go. John, the popular given name. That could be a surname, such as John West. I don't think John is the surname in John West in this case, but anyway. Fictional character, could be fictional character, yeah, like John McClane from Die Hard series, or John Wick. Well, it's just a diatribe of associations. It's just sort of craziness that it's just giving me the most probable list here. And John, historical figure, John the Baptist, John the Apostle, John Calvin. Without more information, it's impossible to determine which John is being referred to. Yeah, well, what would a person do in that situation? They would say, which John? John who? It's very simple. So what we're trying to do is establish context. But what an LLM does, and remember, these are LLMs that some people are saying are artificial general intelligence level. This is human level speech, and yet the underlying LLM is simply producing a vast list of probable word meanings, and obviously it's a very long list. It's impossible to determine which John is being referred to in the context of trying to convince Beth, Sue, and Samantha to eat tuna. So the context is this new conversation. Like the one sentence I've entered is the only context. And humans know the difference between the conversation we're currently having and every conversation we previously had. So what an LLM should be doing is saying everything in the conversation starts now. That's my background information. So if I talk about something in context, it knows that it's only the current conversation, not everything else. So it's a fundamental limitation, not having context in the way that a linguist would describe it, or as a human being that knows how to speak in a conversation would deal with it. Let me just have a look at one more example before we wind up, because we've been running for 7 minutes. Let's just get this up to a few more minutes. So this is CoPilot. This is presumably a far more refined version. Microsoft and OpenAI have an arrangement where they're using ChatGPT, and there's a lot of money involved. So I'm assuming that this is Microsoft's best foot being put forward. Okay, my name is Bond, James Bond. It's probably a bit small. Let's just make this a bit bigger. Okay, check for mistakes. My name is Bond, James Bond. Ah, Mr. Bond, it is an honor. Should I get my gadgets and tux ready for an adventure? Okay, so that's kind of funny. It's got the association of James Bond. What's my name? You introduced yourself as Bond, James Bond. Do you have it? Yeah, I know I did, but you know what that means, right? So what's my first name? First name is James. What's my full name? Your full name is Bond, James Bond. No, it's not. So when we're talking to people, we'll often use clues to help people understand what we're saying. So if I introduce my name as Ball, John Ball, I'm highlighting Ball. I then say my full name so that you get the Ball bit twice, just to reinforce how I pronounce it, so you know that it's not Bond that I've just said, in case I haven't spoken clearly enough. So here we've got a problem with it not understanding. I'm not really Bond, right? I've just told the machine that, but that's not who I am. But if I said, what movies do I like? Recognize the fact that it doesn't know who I am. I've just said I'm Bond, James Bond. And look at this. We get, as James Bond, your taste in movies would be Goldfinger. Well, actually, I don't think I'd like those movies. I'm acting in them. But I wouldn't like those movies because I'm not a real person. The Bourne Identity. That's interesting. Don't know how the Bourne Identity gets into that. It's probably because it's a 007 type of movie. Mission Impossible, again. So it's picking up on the meaning, but that meaning doesn't apply in the case of James Bond, because James Bond is 007. It never relates to non-James Bond movies. Let's just see if we can trick it a little bit more here. So far, it's just failing on the context side, the meaning of things in context. It's getting meaning, sure, but it's then failing because James Bond, yeah, you get the message. So let me change my name to Alan Turing, but don't tell anyone. Your secret is safe with me. Yes, okay, we're winning here. It now knows that I'm Alan Turing. How can I assist you today, Mr. Turing? I just said, don't tell anyone. Well, I guess you're talking to me. So let's just say, so what movies do I like? Oh, okay, it's Alan Turing. It's mentioned my name after keeping it a secret. Your interest might extend beyond espionage into more intellectually stimulating. So the Imitation Game's about Alan Turing. The Beautiful Mind is not Stephen Hawking. So it's about scientists now. Social Network and Mark Zuckerberg. So this concept of what my interests are, it's just coming. It's got this association with Alan Turing that shouldn't be there. My real name is John Ball. What movies do I like? Inception. Let's see. Your movie could span. So now we're into Inception and other things. So look, I'm not. Let's not drill down into that. The point was we've had a bit of fun at the expense of our large language models or CoPilot, a machine that uses large language models. They're not working the way a person would work. So let me just finish with a quick summary. So what we looked at was these large language models have vast amount of information available as associations. So if I say John, it can grab associations. If I say James Bond, it can grab associations. But it's pulling that into memory, and then it's using it for things that are irrelevant. When I say my name's James Bond, well, it may well be James Bond. There's probably, I don't know, thousands of James Bonds in the world, but they don't necessarily only like James Bond movies or other movies about spy thrillers. But the LLM is kind of caught with, it has these associations, and it's just throwing the most probable answer at the associations. But a human being is very different. We work off context, and when we introduce new topics, new people into our conversation, we're able to then work out, well, this is a different conversation, and I can only reference the things that relate to this very conversation, not to everything that I've ever seen on the internet or in another situation. So I found that quite an interesting exposure to the limitations. And when people are saying that we've achieved artificial general intelligence, which means we're now at the human level of interactions with a machine, that this machine's as good as a human, you can see in those very simple examples that we're nowhere near it. It's terrible. It's unrealistic. It doesn't deal with context. So until we have the words that link to meaning being handled in context, we're just looking at something that's emulating a bit of a search engine. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll get into the science and show you how this should be working in a future video. Bye for now.